All right, in this video, we're going to talk about KLWP broadcast. This is a task you can create in Tasker to send over a whole bunch of variables very quickly to KLWP without doing a whole bunch of actions inside of your Tasker task. For example, if I have this one here, now I'm not using KLWP broadcast here because I only had to send over 3 variables real quick, but sometimes you have to send over a lot of variables, and you may notice through time, when you're pulling information from websites, you may notice a pattern. And if you do use a little bit of logic and some JavaScript, you can actually send over these things a lot faster, more streamlined, and you don't have to put as many lines of actions inside of your task. So this one here, this is the default way of sending over variables to KLWP. But I'm going to show you a slightly different way. And it involves KLWP broadcast. I have mentioned this in at least 2 tutorials, but I don't think a lot of folks saw it because those particular videos haven't had a lot of views, but yet I still get this question quite a bit on how am I sending them over so fast? How am I doing it without creating so many actions in my task? Well, this one task right here, KLWP broadcast, send intent, and type this stuff in exactly like you see it. So action, type that in exactly like you see it. Cat is none. And we have 3 extras. Type these in exactly like you see it. Basically, this is going to be that tasker. When we do BR and then tasker inside of KLWP, if you've ever messed around with the broadcast for a variable in KLWP, that's what we type in when we're trying to get a variable from tasker. The variable name is going to be the name that we type inside of KLWP. That's %par1. And then the variable value is going to be the actual thing that you want to see, or that maybe you're sending over a link or a URL for a picture. This is the actual value that it's going to have. So these are the 2 things that we're going to type in KLWP in a minute. But make sure you have these 3 things in, leave the rest of this stuff blank, but make sure target is broadcast receiver. So this task, whatever you called it, I'm calling it KLWP broadcast. Make sure you don't forget that, because that's the task that we're going to perform with our JavaScript. So what I've also created is a test task. And it's just basically a quick way to show you how fast we can send this stuff over. And it's just one little action with some JavaScript inside of it. So JavaScriptlets, I'm not a JavaScript master, but I'm just going to do a real quick demonstration here. Suppose I have an array and I'm calling it array, and I set it equal to, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items inside of this thing. Notice I got it. Notice how I have the little apostrophes. I have commas separating them. And just some demonstration purposes, I have it to alert to me in JavaScript the length of whatever the name of that array is. And I can, if I press play right now, it says alert and I got 6. Well, what does that 6 represent? It represents the length of this array that I've called array. Now, just to show you that, if I call this array XYZ, if I press play now, it's not going to do anything. So I have to do array XYZ.length, whatever the variable name I called here. You can actually get away with not using this, but I like doing it for practice just in case I want to access this variable outside of the JavaScript. That's important to use the word var. We'll talk more about that if we need to later on. But if I press play now, notice now I'm seeing the 6 because that's how many items I have inside of here. Now, if I come in here and add another item, let's just do bathroom. Okay, so now what should happen is we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7 items. So we should see a 7 here. Okay. Now, that's all that is doing. So I don't really need that alert there. But what I want to show you now is, let me change this to XYZ since I changed that name, and let me change this down here. So this is what is important. Now, when we run this JavaScript again, what it's going to do, let me show you a few more things too. Let me show you array XYZ, and let's do 0. This is important in understanding JavaScriptlets as well. Array XYZ, and inside of square brackets, if I put a 0, it should show me book. If I press this, notice it says book. The first item in your array is actually going to have an index of 0. So like phone, for example, even though it's the 3rd item, it's going to be indexed as 0, 1, 2. If I type a 2 in right here, what I should see now is phone, which we do see right there. But again, the array.length is what I wanted to mention there. I don't need to see this anymore. So remember, array.length right now is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this little for loop that we have down here, which I have mentioned in previous tutorials, but I'm going to go ahead and create a tutorial solely on this stuff to get you to understand KLWP broadcasts. This for loop, I'm going to let just some variable I be equal to 0. And as long as this I equal to 0 right now, as long as it's less than the length of this array up here, then I want to run this code inside of here. And every time it runs this code, it's going to loop back and it's going to look for this. And I++ means you're going to add 1 to I. So let's think about this. Right now, I equals 0. It's going to check and see, is I less than the length of this array? Well, the length of this array was what, 7? So sure it is. So it's going to run this code. I'll explain this code in a second. And then when it's done running it, it's going to come back and add 1 to it. That's what I++ does. So now I is equal to 1. Is 1 less than 7? Yes, it is. It's going to run this junk. It's going to come back up here and add 1 to it again. And it's going to keep doing this up until, let's suppose we keep on running this little loop, and suppose we get to 6. So now, we've already done 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, is 6 less than that length? 7? Yes. So it's going to run it, and then it's going to add 1 to it again. Now I is 7. Is 7 less than the length of that array? The answer is no, because 7 is not less than 7. Therefore, what's going to happen is it's not going to run this code anymore, and it's going to be done. Now, this can change dynamically depending on what the length is. That's what's great about this for loop. Now, this code inside of here, you got to type it in exactly like you see it, with a few things different, and I'll show you that. Perform task, that's the little, I guess, the way to initialize the method or tasker to say, okay, perform that task, and notice inside of here, inside of these apostrophes, is the name of that task that I showed you a moment ago, KLWP broadcasts. Comma, 10, don't ask about it. It's got some importance, but just put a 10 there. Comma, this is going to be your %par1, this is going to be your %par2. Basically, all this means is this first thing I have right here after the 10, notice I got them separated with commas, this is the name of the variable that I'm going to use in KLWP. So item, and then I have plus I. That is not inside of apostrophes. So this is going to become, since it's inside of this for loop, it's going to be item 0, item 1, item 2, item 3, item 4, item 5, item 6. You're not going to have an item 7 because this stuff's not going to run, as I mentioned a moment ago. So this is going to be the names that we can use inside of KLWP. This thing right here is going to be the variable value. The value of that variable. We have a variable name that we type in KLWP, but it's going to return something that we see on our home screen. That's the variable value. Well, notice array XYZ, and then inside of this square bracket, I got an I. Well, therefore, this is going to be array XYZ 0, array XYZ 1, and that's what's going to return, when it's array XYZ 0, it's going to return book. When it's array XYZ1, it's going to return the calculator. And I was showing you that up here a moment ago when I was doing these alerts. So notice that little piece right there is exactly what we see here, except we have an I. So what's going to happen is every time this loop runs, I is going to be 0. So it's going to be item 0, and it's going to return this value right here. And then when I becomes 1, it's going to be item 1, and it's going to return the item that has an index of 1, which is going to be calculator. And therefore, we're going to have like item 0, item 1, item 2, item 3, item 4, item 5, and item 6. Now, this can be a little bit confusing to you if you're just messing around with JavaScript, because the length of this array is 7 because we have 7 items. But the way I'm using it here is I'm calling this item 0, item 1, item 2, item 3, item 4, item 5, item 6. Now, there is a way you can get around that as well. I'll come back and show you that at the end. What I'm going to do for right now is I'm just going to go ahead and run this. All right. And I'm going to back out of here. I'm going to back out of here. I'm going to check that little box, and I'm just going to press that button. Something about that does allow it to apply. And now if I go inside of KLWP, remember that variable value name, if I add a text item, and I'm going to type in the broadcast, and that's down here right there, but here's the code or the function, BR tasker. And then what was that name we used? We used item. And then like the first one was item 0. Close that up, put a dollar symbol. Notice we got book. Okay, what about item 1? Calculator. Item 2, phone. Item 3, home. Item 4, pen. Item 5, eraser. Item 6, bathroom. What about 7? Remember, we don't have a 7. Because, yes, we have 7 items, but remember the index started with 0. So that's how we can get those to show up. So right now we don't have a 7, do we? So let me check this. Let me save it. And I'll tell you what, let me actually come back here real quick just so I can get it to display. I'm going to do 6, which is the last item in that list. And I'm just going to make this real big so we can see it. Now, if I change this to 7, which we don't have right now, check that. Save it, go back to the home screen. Notice we don't see anything because we don't have an item with an index of 7. But we can fix that real quick. This is where the broadcast task, KLWP broadcast, works really nice because if I come back into this JavaScript and I add another item. Let's do toilet paper. All right, so there's another item. Now, I've got this blocked out to not show, but what should happen now is our array length is no longer 7, it's going to be 8, which means we should get an I value of 7 down here. So let me go ahead and play that. It says okay, you can't always trust that. Oh, maybe you see that scout's leaving. It's a good time for me to talk about it. I'll probably mention it at the end. I'm going on a 50-mile canoe trip with some Boy Scouts this weekend, so I'll resume this tutorial, which is going to lead up to the baseball and other document object model stuff coming up in the near future. That's why I'm going over this stuff right now. But nonetheless, I got that item in there. We should now have an item 7, which is going to be this item right here. So if I back out of here, now you can also, or you should be able to play it right here as well. Notice we got a green dot, so we should be good to go. Let me check it. Let me just click that for verification, and let me go back to the home screen, and notice we got toilet paper. Boom. So we have it, even though we didn't have it a while ago. When I went back and added another item to that array, now it automatically picked it up in that for loop, and it sent it over to KLWP. I hope that makes sense. Now, something that I do as well with this is, come on now. Something that I also do is, even though JavaScript indexes at 0, that can cause some confusion when I'm sending over a whole bunch of variables. So I still like, since we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, since we have 8 items, I like to call this item 1. I like to call that item 2. I like to call that item 3, etc. Well, what we can do here is we can come into this for loop, we can put a comma, and we can say, let's do another variable, and let's let j be equal to 1. And also in this loop, we're also going to do I++, but we're also going to do j++. What we want to do here is we want to change this right here. Now, j is starting at 1. So this is still going to pull. So when I is 0, j is 1. So item 1, notice j is 1, is still going to pull the index of 0. So that's how I like to think about it. I'm still going to pull array XYZ 0. It's going to pull this value here, but we're now going to call it item number 1 because that's how I like to think about it. This is the first item in my array. And now if we play this, it says okay, and I think everything should be all right. I did not change this. I just changed that, and I changed my pieces up here in my for loop. Back out of here, check it, click it a few times, go back to the home screen, and now watch what happens. We should no longer have an item 0 because now I'm using item, okay, it still says 0, but let me check this. Let me save it. Let's go back to the home screen. Okay, it still says book. Now, it shouldn't be saying that. Or, okay, actually, rather, it is going to say that because I never really changed that value sent over to KLWP. So that actually, that's not an error. But actually, if I come back into here, item 1 should be the same thing. There you go. So item 1, that's the first item in our list. And the reason why item 0 is still displayed is because I've never changed the value of that variable inside of my JavaScript. That's why it's still displaying there. But item 2, calculator, 3, 4, 5, 6, as you can see, those values up here are changing. 7, And now we have item number 8. And just like that, we have sent over a whole bunch of variables. And you may not see the importance of this just yet, but what this allows us to do is it allows us to go to websites. We can pull information from websites. I'm going to be showing you how to get baseball statistics for a whole bunch of baseball teams, like 30 baseball teams. And I don't want to do 30 send variables. I'd rather put it in a loop and let it do all that stuff and send it over to KLWP for me. And the only thing I have to remember is this just items 8 or what have you. Now, while I have you here, let me show you one more thing that we can do with this. A way we can loop through this is, let me see what I want to do here. I'm going to go back into Tasker. And let's go to Test. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to do the following. I'm going to do a perform task here. I'm not going to put this inside of my loop. So I'm going to do perform task KLWP broadcast. This is going to allow us to loop through them inside of KLWP without us having to change values manually. Watch this. 10. And what do we want to call this? I'm going to call this count. We'll call it whatever you want. And then the value is going to be array xyz dot length. What this is going to do is this is going to allow us to send over the length of this array as a number. We're going to call this variable count, and we're going to send it over to KLWP, and it's going to give us a number. It's going to give us the length of this thing. Right now it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm going to go ahead and do one more for the heck of it. Let's do air freshener. All right, so here now we have what, 9 items. It's going to send over the value, the length of this array, and we should also get all 9 items. I'm going to go ahead and play that. Back out of here. I'm going to check it. Back out of here, and I'm going to go back to my home screen. And now what I've done to save a little bit of time, I'm going to show you how we can loop through these items in KLWP. So I have 2 arrows here, and now I can click and I can go through these items. As you can see, I'm going through all of them. And it should go all the way to, what was it, air freshener. And then what it's going to do now, if I keep going this way, it should go back to the beginning, which was book. And that was the first one. So I can go this way. Not only that, I can also go backwards through these items, book, and that should go back to air freshener, as you can see. And then there we go. And let's just go ahead and add another item in here. Clean. Let's play it. I'm going to come back here. I'm going to play it here just in case. Make sure everything went through. Got the green. I'm going to check. Boom. Go back to the home screen. And now, if I go back to book, let me get this out of the way. If I go back to book, I'm going backwards through them. Now notice we got clean, and then we're going to have air freshener, and we should be able to go this way as well. So it's updating on the fly. I hope that makes sense there. Now let me show you how I'm doing that. What I did in KLWP is I added 2 text global variables, and one of them was, I called it items. You can call it whatever you want, but this is where it's a text global and it's BR tasker count. So basically this here is going to return the number of items in that list, that array that we created. And then I also have a GV num, and I gave it a value of 1. All right, so we need these 2 because basically I want GV num to go through from 1 up to the number of items that we have in our array. And then I also, I want GV num to be able to add or subtract, to go back and forth between those values, as I was showing you up here a moment ago. Okay, so the way I did that is I added these 2 arrows. I'm going to show you all this real quick. The forward arrow is this one right here. So I set it to touch. Now, very important here, I want to toggle the global switch num. Num is what I want to change. Remember, num is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or how we have to go. So here's the code. If GV num is less than the number of items, GV items is the number of items we have in our array. So if GV num is less than that, I want to add 1 to GV num. And if it's not less than that, which means we should be at the last item on our list, I want to set it back to 1, which is going to reset it back to the first item in our list. And I'm going to show you how we fix this in our text to actually show the item as well. But that's how we go forward, and we go up until we get to the last item in our list. That's what that code right there is doing. Then if I back out of here and I go to the back arrow, which is going to be arrow back, this one right here. If I go to its touch, its code's a little bit different, but we're still toggling the same global switch. We're toggling GVNum. So now if GVNum is greater than 1, this is how we count backwards. If it's greater than 1, we want to subtract 1. So we want to keep subtracting 1 from GVNum until we are no longer greater than 1. And then what do we do if we're no longer greater than 1? We want to set it to GV items, which is going to set it to that number of items in our list, which is ultimately going to show the last item in that list. So these two arrows, one of them adds until we get to the last item in the list and it resets back to the beginning. This one right here subtracts until we get to the first item, and then it's going to set it back to the last item in the list. I hope that makes sense there. So if I back out of here, what we have to do now is tie all of that into this text piece. And let me go back and find that. It's going to be right here. And now, notice earlier when I was talking about BR tasker, I had an item 0, item 1, item 2. Well, if you put item plus and we put GVNum, GVNum is going to be changing. It's going to be changing from a 1 to a 2 to a 3 to a 4 to a 5, etc., all the way up to the last item number that we have. And since I've incorporated that I and that J piece into my for loop, I'm not using the index of 0 anymore. Now that first item in my array is item 1. That's how I like to think about it. And trust me, it's going to be helpful when we start doing more DOM stuff where the first item you want to deal with, you want to call it item 1. You don't want to call it item 0, if that makes sense. It will later on in the future. But I'm tying that into there. That's what's allowing us to use the arrows. And whenever GVNum changes, as you can see, this thing is changing the word that we have up there. So there you have it, a full tutorial on KLWP broadcast. It has so many other applications to it in terms of sending over stuff. Right now it's kind of plain in terms of me just sending over items from an array. However, this is very useful when we get to the DOM, which is coming up soon. I'm going to be doing a baseball statistics thing using some document object model stuff, DOM parsers or whatever you want to call it, which I've done before, but this is going to be very helpful. And there you have it. That's KLWP broadcast and a little bit of JavaScriptlets. And that's it for this video. I hope it helped.